60 minutes ICTs as drivers for innovation for women and girls. This event is a sort of appetizer for the event coming in just 6 days, which is the International Celebration of Girls in ICT Day, which takes place next Thursday, April 23rd. There are activities that are being planned around the world to encourage women and girls to consider taking up studies in the ICT sector and to pursuing careers in the ICT sector. This year is a special year as it marks the 5th anniversary of Girls in ICT Day. So far, since the inception of the event, we have had over 140 countries celebrating with over 3,500 events and over 110 girls and young women that have participated in this event so far. This year's theme, Girls and Women and Innovation, also coincides with the celebration of ITU's 150th anniversary, where we are looking at ICTs for drivers of innovation, looking at the past and what ICTs have done, looking at the present, and of course looking to the future. When we look at the ICT sector and to sort of set the framework for our discussion today, there are a number of known facts. We know that there are fewer women online. Some estimates indicate that there are some 200 million fewer women online. We also know that there are fewer women owning a mobile phone. Some estimates indicate in South Asia, for example, that women are 38% less likely to own a mobile phone. We also know that there are fewer women that are taking up studies in the STEM field, women and girls. And if we look back at when computer science courses first came on the scene, the ratio of men and women taking those courses was about 50-50. If we look around the world, we see that that has changed dramatically, and the ratio is more like 80-20. 80% male and now 20% women. And if we look at the ICT sector and we look at the workforce of our sector, we see that less than 20% of that workforce is represented by women. If we look specifically, for example, at the app development sector, if we look at Europe, for example, we know that less than 9% of app developers are women. And of course, if we look at leadership in the sector, in the private sector and in government, we see that those numbers continue to go down, with only 6% of the top 100 tech companies being led by women. And with those numbers, I'd now like to turn to our panel, where we're going to be looking at how can we ensure that women have the skills as well as the support to be able to benefit from the amazing opportunities that the ICT sector can offer. We have an amazing panel lined up for this afternoon's Google Hangout that will help us identify concrete actions as to how we can move the needle. How can we make change in order to bring more women and girls into this sector? We also have a number of participants that are joining us around the world, and if you're following, we would invite you to engage with us by sending in any questions or comments that you might have over Twitter by using the hashtag #GirlsInICT. So now I'd like to introduce our panel. We have with us this afternoon Rose Robinson. Rose is a senior manager, Sisters Keeper of the Anita Borg Institute. We also have Inal Uygur, who is the head of processes and projects at the International School here in Geneva. We have Alja Isakovic, who's the co-founder of CodeCatz, and we have Catherine Mahugu, who's the founder of Soko. Our panelists will briefly introduce themselves, and then they will make a few comments about how they see we can actually move the needle and make change and difference in this sector. So I'd like to first turn over to Rose and ask you, Rose, maybe if you could say first a few words about yourself and tell us what you're doing. So Rose, over to you.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be a part of this incredible panel. I want to thank ITU for organizing this panel. I'm Rose Robinson. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, in the U.S. I am, as Lucy mentioned, I am her sister's keeper. That means that I am the manager of a lot of our sisters' communities. Sisters was created in 1987, and it is a community, a global community of technical women. We have women from more than 60 countries. This was created back in 1987 by Dr. Anita Borg herself. Her vision was to increase the number of women in computer science and making the environments in which women work more conducive to their continued participation in the field. Women in technology is the heart of Anita Borg's mission, and we try to connect, inspire, and guide women in computing and organization. I've actually been a sister for 15 years now. I joined back in 2000. My tech career spans more than 20 years. I've been in telecommunications, GIS, software implementations, and now I'm working toward a more inclusive and diverse tech community. Thank you for having me.
Rose. So we're now going to turn over to Inal. Please, over to you.
And I'd like to agree with Rose, and thank you for organizing this event. I'd also like to say that it's an honor to be a minority on this panel. And let me tell you a little bit about myself. I have a Danish mom and a Turkish dad. I was born in Denmark. When I was young, I grew up in France, and then Norway, and then France again, and then Holland, and then France again, and then Switzerland, and then I went to the US, and I did a computer science degree at MIT. Then I worked at CERN for a few years, and I worked in finance at Hewlett-Packard. I worked in marketing. I worked in sales. I worked in administration. And I pretty much finished a career there when I became a dad. And having become a dad, I realized that being a vice president in an American company didn't give me a lot of time for my kids. So I went to school, which has a lot of vacations. And it allowed me to get very, very interested in education. I also have one daughter and one son, so I can have firsthand view on the differences. At school, I have 800 daughters and sons, and I can see the difference between boys and girls there. Why am I so interested in girls and women in innovation? Well, one of the things is because I've had a varied experience of the world from many different points of view, I think that fundamentally, I mean, the literature is interesting and the statistics are interesting, but I think that the way the world is going, it becomes more and more difficult to predict what's going to happen. So when I read literature about what we're going to need in 10 years, I'm a little bit wary about it. On the other hand, there are some real trends that I see happening. And the big trend that we have now is globalization, which means that we're networking a lot closer than we used to. And in a networked environment, I think that there are two things that we're going to need. One of the trends that I see is a trend in IT. I can't think of a single career today where you're not somehow exposed to IT. And I have personal experience with top managers who are not conversant in IT. I'm not talking about being able to code or anything, but even understanding what is possible, taking very poor decisions. And when top managers take poor decisions in a networked world, it can have huge impact. So I just think that innovation, basically, boy or girl, is important for tomorrow. Now, why girls? Well, girls, and we can go way back to the anthropological side of it, but girls are good at networking. Girls are better at running the planet than the men are. And that's just that's something that I'm absolutely convinced of. I think that one of the things that we're seeing now is there are women, and it's a good thing, who are getting into top positions and who are beginning to be interested in IT. But I think that the way that they have to get there in the last 15 years was by acting like men, because the way the world is run is structured according to a man's way of running things. I think that we have to move towards an environment where the next generation of women can stand on the heads of the current generation of women, get to the top, and start acting like women and doing this world some good. We can talk maybe a little bit later.
Yes, we'll come back, of course. So now we're going to head over to Alja, who is also the subject of the ITU 150 monthly storytelling campaign. So I invite you to read more about what she's doing on the itu150.org website. So Alja, over to you.
Thanks, happy to be here. So my day job is currently at Cube Sensors, a hardware startup here in Slovenia. I've been in ICT-related jobs for over 10 years, and I'm, like Inal right now, usually one of the few women in the room at tech events, which is actually what got me interested in the topic we're discussing today. So I wanted to bring more women in this wonderful profession. So about 3 years ago, I organized the first Raise Girls programming workshop here in Slovenia. We were hoping for about 20 applications. We got almost 600, which proved that women are increasingly interested in this sort of skills. So since then, I organized more workshops like that have been focused specifically on women and programming. And we've received lots of interest, both from women and from professional developers who want to get more women involved in the field. And 2 years ago, I started CodeCatz, which is a coding study group where women are never in the minority. We basically meet every Wednesday and work on a variety of open source projects together and try to increase the visibility of women in this field. And one of the most visible projects we did together was the events website for last year's Europe Code Week, which also tried to promote coding across Europe and got over 3,000 events. So yeah, that's about my job.
That's great. Wonderful. Thank you. And now we're going to hear from Catherine. Catherine, over to you.
Yes, it's a great opportunity and pleasure to be attending this forum. As you mentioned earlier, I'm a co-founder of Soko. So Soko is an online destination platform for shoppers to discover stunning handcrafted accessories from all over the world and purchase them directly from the designers and the artisans. So what really inspired us, me and my two other co-founders, to start this company is that we noticed that women make majority, women in the informal communities, especially in the developing world, usually work in the informal communities. And to be particular, in the craft industries, they make up 70% of this sector. So over 85% of women in the sub-Saharan Africa are self-employed in the informal communities. So at Soko, what we decided to do was we wanted to empower these small-scale producers, who majority of them are women, to participate in the international trade that they currently have no access to. So using our mobile technology, these artisans can create their personal online storefronts, and also the global consumers can buy directly from the vendors and using our e-commerce website, therefore revolutionizing the supply chain into a peer-to-peer exchange. So that's the motivation for just having Soko. And also, I'm an ITU Young Innovators Fellow, so I'm more than happy to still maintain the contact with ITU.
Thanks, Catherine. And we, of course, at ITU are very proud that you were one of the winners of the ITU Telecom Young Innovator competition. So Congratulations and thanks. It's great to have you with us. So now we're going to turn over to the questions and give each of you some additional opportunities to talk about the work that you're doing. So the first question is for Rose. Rose, the Anita Borg Foundation is dedicated to promoting gender equality in technology. Can you tell us how can we create the right environment, and also how would more women and girls in the ICT STEM field, how would it change the landscape?
Thank you. I think from what we've seen within just the work that we do, I think the question is, why wouldn't we have more women? Inal mentioned that we run things better, that we manage finances better. We represent half of the intellectual capital of the world. We have great ideas. We bring different experiences and perspectives. And when you bring that into the table, into the realm of IT, there are so much better outcomes. The landscape changes. There's more income opportunities. The innovation becomes real products and better products that are delivered. Women are great networkers. We communicate with each other so much well. We own the social media space. We tend to engage our community and at a local level to make sure that we're solving problems that matter to us. So we're making real global impact starting at a very local level. One of the things that we've seen is that women face a lot of social and cultural discrimination, not just with trying to figure out, okay, do they really love technology? There's no question that we do. But in the workforce, just like Anna mentioned earlier, is that it's mostly men. And so we need to work on changing that. How we do that is a lot of the programs that we do, particularly from sisters. We have a program called Pass It On Award, where we give small amounts of grants. Our spring application is open currently, but there are $500 and $1,000 that are awarded. These are grants. These are not loans or anything that they have to pay back. But these are giving opportunities for women around the world to use these funds to make impact and change in their communities. So they have to use the grant to actually pass it on. And that's the whole moral. We have a moral obligation from sisters to actually pass on the benefits that we have earned as being a sister. So they use those funds to actually maybe put on a workshop. There's a lot of, maybe there's equipment that they need. Some women use it for school. Maybe they don't just have enough for the tuitions or the schools and lab. We definitely encourage that as well. So that's one of the ways that we are helping on our programs. Another program, we just released a top company list for our community. And this is important too, because we actually want to work with companies that are really embracing women, that are working really hard internally to change the makeup and the landscape of their tech community right now. So we work with organizations and companies that really want to learn what's happening internally, that they're not attracting women, that maybe they're not advancing women at the rate that they should be, or they're not seeing the opportunities that women have within their own companies. So we just released that earlier this week. So that's really important to preparing the next generation, the next wave of women that are actually going to be in the workforce as well. We also participate in a lot of open source projects. So from Sisters' perspective, we have open source projects where we have mentors as well as students. And we are a mentoring organization, part of Google Summer of Code. So we have a set number of students, and then we have mentors coming on board. And these mentors are women, mostly women. We do have a few men also, but that's that's us helping them, trying to not only get from what they're learning in the classroom, but getting real-world experience on an actual project. So we're actually helping them level up their skills and learning more about being on a project, being on a team, product design, and the whole software development life cycle. So we have all of these programs that are helping our community of women that want to be in this space, but really oftentimes don't have the resources. So that's what Anita Borg Institute really provides, is a lot of resources and programs to women if they are interested in technology.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. Thanks very much. Inal, we're going to turn over to you. You joined us, I guess it was 5 years, the first year that we celebrated. You joined us for our first panel on Girls in ICT Day. And I remember very well you talked about the role of the teacher in sort of encouraging and influencing young people and the direction that they choose to follow in their career and future studies. Over the past 5 years, have you seen a change in teachers' understanding in promoting STEM fields for girls? Have you seen a change, and are there other things that we can be doing to try to get more girls interested in taking up technology and STEM studies overall? Or is it just that girls still are not interested in these subjects?
That's an excellent question. Excellent question. If we come back to, I've been in education now for 10 years, and it's been incredibly interesting to see how things work. And I think that we're moving very much into it. I mean, we live in an economic kind of world, and we think of things in terms of trade. And service products are the kind of thing that have come up. We've even gone further than service products now, but I think that school is looked upon as a service product. So there's a kind of expectation that you send your kids to school and they get educated. It doesn't actually work like that. I think that the way it works is that kids, people, human beings, are educated by whatever environment they're in. And that means that there's the home and there's the school. And it also means that there's the larger environment. And as far as I can tell, education or learning comes from two things: motivation, which you mentioned, and encouragement. And I think that if we look at it from that point of view, there's the overall environmental side of things, which is the country and the world. And if I look back to when I was a kid, I remember when I was 10 years old, I watched Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. Now that's motivation. You know, I got into science and math and stuff. But this was something that one could dream about. It was somebody you could model on. I'm not sure what kids today can actually model on. We're not, as a planet, we're not into really wild, adventurous innovation. And if the way that we actually learn is by modeling off somebody else and by dreaming, then we need to give the kids that kind of dream. So I think that there's something to do on a governmental, on an international organization, and on a industry also has to be pushed by everybody to get into more adventurous kind of things so that we can, as a species, be motivated to do something. And I agree very much with Rose when she says, you know, that the community has a huge power vis-a-vis governments and international organizations and industry. And I think the internet and technology is making that possible. That's one side. And if we get to the home and the school, I think that there's also been a trend. In the olden days, we needed to go to school to learn how to write and how to read and how to do math in our heads. That's not such a not such a necessary skill anymore. And we moved towards an environment where, I mean, if you needed to learn how to make bread, then you just needed to learn that skill. And then we moved to an environment, now we're in an environment where abstract thinking is much more important. And I think we're moving to an environment in the future where abstract skills in themselves aren't enough anymore. Because I think we're talking a lot now about the need to learn, because we're going to have lifelong learning. But again, lifelong learning isn't useful if you only have learned how to absorb what somebody else knows. That's not going to be enough anymore. I think the kids need to learn how to research. Research means being motivated to find something out and doing what you can with what you have to find that out. That's what I think research is. And in that sense, I think the school is doing stuff to try and work on this. It's a difficult thing to do because school is modeled on the teacher knowing and telling the kids. So at the international school, we're very much have plans to look at different ways of doing that. And I think that what you want to do is move towards a classroom model where you ask a question and you encourage the kids to try and find out the answer. Because today we're in an environment where they can find it out without just asking the teacher. I think those are two areas where we need to, and we are moving forward, but it's a big task. Now, where do girls fit in? I think once we move into that environment, and once girls have an equal opportunity and an interest there, I mean, they'll take care of themselves and they'll show us guys how to do stuff.
Great, thank you. So clearly everybody has a role to play. There's a role for governments, there's a role for international organizations, as you said, there's a role for educators, and of course industry. Alja, you've been doing some amazing work specifically on coding clubs, and we see coding in general, the issue of teaching kids how to code, boys and girls, are being picked up by not only heads of state in countries such as the US and the UK, but it's also being picked up by musicians, Hollywood stars. Everybody seems to start to understand the importance of teaching digital literacy at a young age for both boys and girls. Can you tell us a little more about the impact that you're seeing from the CodeCatz workshops that you've been doing, and what's been the impact of the EU Code Week, and should we be pushing for a sort of global Code Week?
Well, first of all, it's not just the young kids. It's great to start with the young kids, but we are already lacking skilled developers and IT workers right now. So I think there's also lots of opportunity in getting adults interested in this field, even if they've been doing something else before. Now, of course, it's something really interesting because when we're talking about learning coding, we often talk about young kids. But my personal experience has actually been that it's really difficult to get high school students, especially girls, interested in our workshops. Which is a critical time, you know, to get experience and to choose your future studies and career, basically. And we've been having lots of problems with attracting that group. So I don't know yet what the magic formula for that is, but we're gonna need to focus on that group specifically. One thing we've noticed is that as girls and they go into adulthood and they become students and they start looking for jobs, they actually realize they're lacking technical skills, and they're actively looking for workshops and all sorts of things that can help them get these skills. But we also see that there's still a lot of stereotypes, women talking in our in the applications for our workshops about how they still think that coding and IT is a man's field. And what even upsets me even more is when they talk how they ask their brothers or fathers to learn coding, to teach them coding, and they get answers like, this wouldn't be interesting for you, or it's not something that you could do. So we still have a long road ahead of us. Now, you also mentioned positive effects, what positive effects we've been seeing, and yes, I mean, once Rose was talking about this, giving women the power of creation, giving them a voice, and it certainly is a big difference, not just professionally, but also personally, because once you become the creator, once you start doing something on your own, you get a lot of power, you get more self-esteem, and you also become basically a better person, which is why we also think the work we do with CodeCatz, it's not just about technical skills, it's also empowering women. It's also providing a support network for women. And same as Rose already mentioned, it's also raising awareness from companies that they need to make IT a safe and welcoming space for women, because it's not just a matter of getting more women interested in coding and technology, it's also keeping women who are already there. And yeah, you also mentioned Europe Code Week. We were really amazed by the feedback and response we got from all over Europe. There's also the Hour of Code initiative originating from the US, and I think all these initiatives are great because they get people excited about coding. They encourage teachers to learn more, to put some of that in the curriculum, in the classes, which is great. So any initiatives of that sort, I think, are great.
Thank you, Alja. Before we turn over to Catherine to hear more about her work, I want to maybe turn back to Rose and to Inal. Alja mentioned the issue of stereotypes and the challenge with those stereotypes that exist that preclude women from actually entering into the sector or taking up these studies at the school level. Rose, do you want to comment on how you see we can overcome some of those stereotypes? And then maybe, Inal, if you can comment in the school context, what we can do?
Yeah, you know, what Alja is doing right now is the most powerful program that I've seen also, and that's exactly why we're engaged in a lot of mentoring. And I mentioned our open source projects as well. We had a student that went from student to mentor to now an admin of the open source development right now, and she was more concerned about and nervous about being a mentor. You see these young women and they have this incredible talent, but they don't see it within themselves. And the mentoring piece really opens their eyes to that. And so she was very nervous about making that transition from being a student to a mentor. But when she actually started mentoring another student, it really lifted her self-confidence. She began to just be more outgoing, getting her ideas there. And she wasn't afraid to even go out into the larger tech community, which is mostly all men, probably 99% of it is all men. And that was a big shift for us. We see a lot of mentoring really makes a difference. And it could be one-on-one mentoring. It could be what Alja is doing. We see that a lot in the U.S. It's so inspiring to work with other women and know that you are not alone, number one, and that, okay, there are women in this field that feel the same way as I do, and it's not just a man's world or a man's field. And this is something that I enjoy, and everyone else enjoys it as well. So you see that shift when you are just giving the opportunity to women to be exposed to the technology, and then having their creative juices just flow. It is very, very powerful. We see that time and time again in mentoring programs. And I'll pass it over to Inal.
Thank you. That a very, very interesting point, the stereotypes. In fact, when Alja said it, I wrote it down because I was going to mention something about it. Stereotypes, and I'd like to get back just to the mechanism that works there. I talked about modeling. I think that it's very difficult to get out of this stereotypical environment for girls because the women who they're going to model off of come from the previous generation. And that's what makes it really difficult to come out of that. At the same time, I think that we might be exaggerating. I mean, there's a difficulty today because the advances, we've gotten used to a pace of change that is incredibly rapid. And generations just don't go that fast. So we're used to things changing, but we have difficulty keeping up with it because the generation, it takes a new generation to take over. When I look at the girls in school, they're already one step ahead of the previous generation. And I think it'll take the time for them to get out into the marketplace and start acting like women and show us how it's done, and then they can show their daughters. And their daughters will have somebody to look at. I think that what you girls are doing is absolutely incredible because you are actually now on the web today, you're acting as models. And for somebody to see that is important. And Rose, you mentioned it. You said when these mentors get out there and know that they're not alone, that's all it takes. That means that in their heads, they thought they were just different. And they need to know even just one other person is enough for them to say, oh, I can do this. Of course, in the schools, I already see that happening. So in the classrooms here in the international school where we have a huge mix of backgrounds, there's very, very little difference in the heads of the kids between who's a girl or who's a boy or who's from here or who's from there. And that makes a huge difference. But when they look outside to see a model, they'll see, if they see a lady running a corporation, they'll see a lady running a corporation like a man would. And that's their model today. I suspect that once they get to that position, they'll be more likely to run it like a lady would. And then we'll start getting some good models.
Great, thank you. And now we're going to turn over to Catherine. Catherine, your story is very inspirational, from having an initial idea, as I mentioned before, winning the ITU's Telecom Young Innovators Competition, and now running a highly successful business. Tell us a little bit about the obstacles that you faced during this process. And do you think that your background in technology gave you a bit of a competitive edge in the business sector? And if you would also like to comment on some of the previous remarks about, did you face any sort of stereotypes or other sort of hurdles when you were putting together your business? So over to you, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been running Soko for around 4 years now. And I'll admit it wasn't an easy journey. It required passion and resilience just to keep going. I'm currently based in Nairobi, Kenya, and East Africa is currently considered as a hotbed of innovation. And also, as a result, it's dubbed as the Silicon Savannah of Africa. So one of the challenges So when we were starting out the company, Soko is an internet business, and half of which operates in a context with limited connectivity. And we developed a social recruitment and operation model inspired by online internet models, but applied through offline social networks. This was like, for example, our initial iteration of the mobile technology was SMS and MMS. So we leveraged on the high penetration rate of the mobile phones within within Kenya. So the penetration rate is about 70% compared to a computer rate, which is averagely around 20%. So that's one of the first challenge we had. And so in retrospect, many of our challenges we faced have turned out to be great opportunities for us to leverage on. The other would be, we would face, network failures was like a commonplace in the artisan market. So these outages have in the end made our organization more resilient and closely integrated. It's led to creating more resilient mobile tools by being sensitive and responsive to the local conditions. The third challenge would be when we started out as a core technology company. However, to run a business sustainably, you need also other value-added services, and we decided to be both a technology and a service company at the same time. So although our core technology provides us with the ability to run an innovative company, it's the service layers we developed on top of this core technology that has made us have this sticky and attractiveness to our consumers as well as our artisan network. So developing the service suite was almost like, launching another business for us, and we had to, pivot our business for us to meet the demand and also just ensure that we're still sustainable. So those are the three main challenges I'd highlight. And in terms of what I think my background in technology has given me a competitive edge, I'd say yes, my background is actually in computer science, and I've used my technical skills in fostering innovation in the company. So the Soko innovation leverages on existing communication technology and infrastructure to pioneer a completely new marketplace. So this new marketplace grants artisans direct access to the web community, and internet consumers directly have now a direct access to the artisans. So this linkage of the offline artisans to the online consumer was not there, and you were able to tackle the current issues that they faced, which was they could not access credit card purchases. So we developed a mobile payment integration for them. Two, they could not upload information of themselves or of their products. So we created a mobile technology where we'd aggregate the data for them on the web. And also now being able to export the products to the international marketplace, which was a challenge for them, and we were able to solve it. To now also answer the other questions in terms of the stereotype, I'd say yes, it was a challenge for me. But I think just how I was raised, my family have really been, the background has been in the STEM field, so particularly in engineering. So I had a very, I had a fascination in the engineering and ICT field from a very young age. But however, in terms of the uptake of ICT as a course within my country, in terms of the female ratio, it's pretty low. And that's one of the things was I just found a bit, killer. Even in class, the ratio of girls to women was not as high as I'd expected. And also how women just had confidence in themselves wasn't to the level I wanted. It was more of they were not confident in the skills that they had, and they'd want to depend on just guys generally to help them, assist them in doing projects. So also just the entrepreneurial spirit. I was working on Soko while I was still in school, so that was quite a challenge for me. But I thought I could still do it at the same time. And once I was done with school, I was working on Soko full time, and it's so far been 4 years since then. So that's my feedback on that.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And you're really you are a role model for young women and girls thinking about the future and what can they do and how can they embrace technology. At this point, we're collecting questions. So if you're following remotely and you'd like to send in a question, please just send it in to the hashtag Girls in ICT. I think I'm going to ask first a question back to Catherine. We have seen that that female graduates seem to have more trouble raising venture capital for their startup ideas. Do you have any comments about that, and how do you think we can turn that around in order to give young women the chance to succeed?
Mm-hmm. Just from the observation I've had over the past few years about just VC or just angel investment funding within our community, initially there are not too many investors who are particularly interested in investing in women-founded companies. However, that has drastically changed, where there even funds, you can have competitions which are women focused, competitions that are focused on gender, gender inclusion, women empowerment, and I think if we have more of that, just awareness of that, such such funds are available to ensure that you're able to move your company from just a prototype stage to a pilot to even growth. I think that would be great. So I think just having also just the entrepreneurs knowing that such avenues are available for them.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Alja, do you want to comment on the venture capital angle? Do you have anything you'd like to add there?
Well, yeah, I certainly agree. I mean, not currently one of the founders of the startup I work at, but you certainly get treated differently as a woman. Just going in a meeting and you're the only woman in the room, and everyone assumes you don't have any technical skills, and you're just there, doing something else. Or when you're introducing your product at tech events, people don't even want to ask you technical questions because you assume you're there, just as a hostess and not really part of the company. So I've certainly experienced, being treated differently because I'm a woman in the startup world.
Great, thanks. Thank you. So now I have a question, maybe first to Rose, and then Inal, if you'd like to comment as well. We've often heard about the success that the Harvey Mudd College in the United States has had in attracting more women into their engineering programs, and I think last year was the first time they actually graduated more women than men. And they did this through some, let's say, simple changes in renaming courses and, let's say, removing students that were maybe intimidating, also by providing research opportunities for young women, and eventually by changing the sort of ratio male-female teachers. Rose, do you have any comments on, what can universities do to try to emulate what Harvey Mudd has done? What has been your experience from the Anita Borg side? And then maybe, Inal, over to you from the international, secondary education level. What do you think can be done?
Sure. So I know Maria Klawe, who is the actual president at Harvey Mudd, and one of the things she does for the first year computer science students is to bring them to Grace Hopper. So Grace Hopper is our flagship conference. It's our largest conference. It's the Grace Hopper Celebration for Women in Computing. Now last year it was hosted in Phoenix, Arizona. We had more than 7,000, almost 8,000 attendees. We expect to have over 11,000 this year, and it'll be hosted in Houston, Texas. What the Grace Hopper does is we have specialized program, particularly to reach different areas for women who are in the computing field, whether they're students, whether they're early career, mid-career, and those who are at the senior level as well. I've seen we have a lot of we partner with a lot of colleges and universities that do the same thing to bring and inspire them. It's like the modeling, right? And it's like you want to be sure that there are other women who are in the field who are there, that you made that right decision to enter into the computer science field. On the first day, we even have workshops like leadership workshop, but we also have an open source day, which Sisters founded at Grace Hopper Celebration. We've seen there's also an educational track, student track, PhD track, and then Thursday are more professionals and community-oriented as well on Friday as well. So when you see this realm of the sea of women in computing, there's no doubt that, okay, I belong here. I can get here, and that is a lot of what a lot of the colleges and universities are doing, is because they need to have they need to make sure that these women are inspired and that they know that they are not alone, that they have a community that they can work with. And I've seen that time and time again, especially with the Harvey Mudd success. And we are so proud to partner with them. Maria Klawe is a great supporter of the Institute, and we've seen that emulated time and time again with other universities as well.
Great, thanks very much, Rose. So Inal, over to you, just for a very brief answer, because I'm being told we only have about 5 minutes left. So Inal, if you want to comment on that, thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's very, very interesting, but I think I'd just like to comment on the fact that I think it can, the examples we just heard show how subtle the influence can be. I think if you, the idea of a university taking a group of kids to see your conference there and getting to a conference where there's 11,000 women in that field, that one experience can be enough for them to be able to say, oh my God, I can do this. And they know that they can do it. It's just that the environment is telling them very subtly that they can't. I think that, of course, in high school, the girls-boys ratio is fairly balanced, so it's not an issue there. It's an issue when it comes to choosing what you want to study and getting to university, and because a lot of the girls don't choose engineering, then they get to schools where there's not a lot of girl engineers. So whatever little things you can do to balance that, I think makes a difference. The other subtle thing is, of course, if you get to a school where you have a balanced number of girls and boys, that's a very subtle but very important message.
Thanks. Absolutely, I totally agree with you, and that completely underscores the importance of doing Girls in ICT Day activities and bringing girls together to see what's out there and see how many women are doing amazing things in this field. So just maybe a last question, and I would ask each of you to sort of very briefly respond. If we could focus on what concrete steps or actions that we can take, let's say over the next 5 years, to really move the needle and try to unleash the endless opportunities that ICTs can provide to women and girls in innovation. So I'm going to turn first to Alja. So if you can just give me very briefly your thoughts of concrete steps or actions.
I think it's really important to encourage women to speak up. So there are women in technology, make them more visible, give us a voice, like these events, but also at events, at typical technological events where women are the minority. So just encourage women to speak up.
Great, thank you. So Rose, over to you.
I would definitely say sisters. Our community of women we have the numbers. If you want inspiration, if you want to find women who are driven and excited and creative about technology, then Sisters is your place. So definitely look to Sisters. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rose. So Inal, to you.
Thank you. I heard two words, one from Alja, encourage. I heard community. I think these are all little things that we can do on a day-to-day basis. I think in schools, what we can do is what I'm doing at our school is I'm testing out some new kind of classroom environment where it's a much more research-oriented environment where the kids actually grade each other. And I think that's something that can be done in school. I think it can be done at home. I think it can be done in any company, in any university. And I think that you ladies are a super example of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Catherine, over to you.
Mm-hmm. I would say is that we need more role models and mentorship programs, and just from the role models, them telling their stories, because I think their stories can act as an eye-opener to women in the same field, and this can even lead to a revolution of the status quo and the kind of statistics of the gender balance in the workplace.
Thanks, Catherine, and thanks very much for sharing your story with us. So great comments. We need to encourage, we need to speak up. Sisters is your place. We need to look at testing new environments, and of course role models and storytelling. And with that, unfortunately, we're out of time, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. It's been a great discussion. As I mentioned, this is a sort of appetizer to our main event that's taking place next Thursday on April 23rd. It's the Global Celebration. I hope you can join us. The event that we're doing here at the ITU headquarters in Geneva will be webcast, and I invite you to visit the girlsinict.org website, and you can find out more information about how you can participate in these events. So thank you very much for joining, and have a great weekend.